So there is quality to desire. Some you describe some as thick and some as thin, but I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think it's incorrect to say some desires are better than other desires. Some desires are very high quality desires, and some desires are very low quality desires. And where would you put our culture at the moment on, if you lump all of our desires together, all our wanting together, are we operating from a fairly low quality desire? And how do you see that as impacting us?
It seems to me that our culture is full of very thin desires. And I would agree with you that their desires have various qualities, and not all desires are the same. And I think that's part of the message that our culture is sending, is that all desires are the same. Whatever you want, if you want it, go for it. That's not the way that I want to raise my children. There's a hierarchy of desires. I often tell I tell the story of a friend that I had who I lived in Vegas for several years, and I had at one point, right around the time I was beginning to take my faith seriously, I had a friend who decided to throw a bachelor party in Vegas, and he scheduled it for whatever reason. It happened to be Good Friday. And so what do? I have a desire to be a good friend and to be there for my friend. And he wasn't going to do anything crazy, but that's a desire that I have, to be a good friend, a loyal friend who's there and celebrates these beautiful moments of engagement and marriage. And then I have, desire. This is the most solemn day of the year for me, right? And if I didn't have a hierarchy of desire, if one of those desires wasn't more important, if there wasn't some kind of objective criteria by which to evaluate these two desires, I could be totally, torn apart by that decision. I chose to we hung out at another time. I didn't make the bachelor party in Vegas. I chose to do the Triduum, with my family. So there is, I think, a hierarchy of desires. We have to sort of step back and see, when are we being dominated by things that ultimately we'll look back on a month or a year from now and think we're silly. These things that we pursue so strongly, some short-term financial things, our pride and our envy often is fueling desires. There's nothing there at the end. There's nothing real there at the end. Where there's other desires, for holiness, for deep, nourishing, rich relationships, desires to help people that are suffering, to be there by people that need us. Those are thicker desires, and it seems to me that the culture is sort of a runaway train of many very thin desires, and we just need more and more of them. There's nothing. It's kind of like eating fast food. Nothing kind of sticks, and that does concern me. It does concern me when and I think social media has played a very big role in that process. And at some point, I do think we're going to need to come back to models of desire that stand the test of time, right? The saints would be a great example of that. To show, here are people that have pursued desires that endured and ended up leading to a deep, enduring sense of satisfaction and fulfillment and service to others, and ultimately love, because the highest expression of desire is love, right? There are selfish desires, and then there's self-giving desires, and the desire to give of oneself.
So you've mentioned social media a couple of times, and in the book you talk about Peter Thiel as an early investor in Facebook, and how Girard's philosophy, or the idea of mimetic desire, influenced him. How is mimetic desire playing out in social media from the beginning and then today?
Peter Thiel was the first investor in Facebook. I think it was 2004, if I remember correctly, when Facebook was nothing really. It was just on a few college campuses. And he, having studied under Rene Girard at Stanford, was very familiar with the idea of mimesis. And he saw Facebook's model being an engine of mimetic desire. Your friends are on it, it makes you want to be on it, and then you're talking about things that you saw on Facebook, which makes it even doubly mimetic. And it's fueled by, it's fueled really by a form of imitation. And he saw that, and he bet on Facebook because as he told me in the book when I interviewed him, I bet on mimesis, right? For better or worse, I knew that this thing was going to be highly mimetic, so I bet on mimesis. And I think it's, and since then, we now have dozens of different forms of social media. And TikTok to me is the most interesting one because it's the most mimetic of all the platforms. It's kind of premised on, you see somebody do a dance and you try to imitate it. And the music, right? You find the trending music. I mean, the whole thing is almost premised on good, on being a good imitator in a certain sense, right? Getting on the right trends. And that's why it's so incredibly powerful, right? I mean, there's the algorithm, there's a technological component of it, but to me, that's less important than the human component of it, which is the mimesis. I mean, we always just, we credit the technology sometimes with why these things are so powerful. Yeah. But there's something deeply, this goes to the core of how we are, which is, we see these things and it holds up a mirror to ourselves and we start to relate to these things that we see. Instagram is incredibly powerful. So I don't think it's not going anywhere, but one of the things I actually teach about this as my role as a professor, and help my students try to understand their relationship with social media and with all of the millions of models of desire that they're exposed to on social media, and then begin to understand how they might be affecting them, because it affects me in a major way. During the pandemic, I actually had a desire to buy a van and travel around the country with my wife to beautiful locations, because I had been following this hashtag van life on Instagram, where I saw these people living these glamorous lives in these really fancy, nice vans, traveling to the Grand Canyon and taking these beautiful pictures. And I said, well, I can't go into the office anyway. What if we did that? What if we got an RV, or what if we got a van? And my wife just, laughed and said, Luke, you're writing a book on mimetic desire, and you've just been totally hijacked by looking at this van life thing on Instagram. So it's incredibly powerful. And I do think the first step is just becoming aware of how we're affected by various models.